Welcome to Faculty of Grad Studies at York University, our live event, focusing on our wish that you can get a little taste, a little experience of what graduate studies at York University might look like, might live like, might feel like. And we have several students today who are going to share their own lived experiences with you based on questions that came into us at the Faculty of Grad Studies that you or other people may have wanted to understand. And so at this moment, what I'd like to do is have each of our panelists introduce themselves. And I'm going to start with Nitima.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nitima Bhatia, and I am a second-year PhD student at the Faculty of Education. And my research area focuses on sustainable development goals and higher education institutes. I also did my master's from York, from the Faculty of Environment and Urban Change in 2020. And I also work as a research assistant at York.
Thank you so much.
Excited to be here. Thank you.
I'm excited you're here. Fantastic. Sarah, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Redikopp. I'm a PhD candidate in the graduate program of Gender, Feminist, and Women's Studies here at York. My scholarship and research is in broad areas of critical mental health, MAD studies, feminist disability, and feminist care ethics. And my doctoral research explores the affective and intersubjective and structural dimensions of self-harm and care seeking among women, trans, and non-binary folks in Canada.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sarah. Margaret.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Margaret Lebold. I'm a third-year PhD student in the School of Nursing at York University. And my research focuses on the career lives of older, diverse public health nurses. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much. Ariella.
Hi, my name is Ariella Markus, and I am a second-year master's student. I'm in the Interdisciplinary Studies program, which means that I have 3 separate disciplines that I'm combining in a unique way. They are education, religion, and gender feminist studies. So I'm combining those in order to research with modern Orthodox Jewish women about prayer experiences in their childhood.
Thank you so much. What a fantastic panel we have. We're just so excited. There was many people excited to come on. So what I've said is that we have several questions that our panelists are prepared to answer. For each question, we have 2 panelists who have a prepared response. And at the end, the last 10 minutes, there'll be time for sort of live Q&A that our moderator, Nessa, is going to be facilitating. So I am the Associate Dean Academic in the Faculty of Grad Studies, and I'm also a faculty member in the School of Nursing, in the School of Gender, Feminist, and Women's Studies, and a few other schools. We'll just leave it there for now. So imagine that you might be able to experience York University. Just listen to these panelists talk about their experiences, and we hope you leave thinking, maybe I'll think about it, maybe I'll apply, maybe this is for me. So our first question is, what inspired you and your decision to pursue a master's or doctoral degree? Nitima.
So for me, I always wanted to do a PhD. I did my education from India, but due to some reasons, I couldn't pursue a PhD in India. So when I came to Canada in 2017, I always wanted to work on that dream of PhD. So the higher education system in India and in Canada are like different. So therefore, I wanted to learn and understand first the system here, the academic system. Then I wanted to enter into the PhD. So first I applied for an MES degree, that's Master's in Environmental Studies at York. And after doing that for 2 years, I completed my master's, and then I applied for PhD and I got admission in PhD. So I think one thing that inspired me was that the programs were fully funded. So like being a newcomer, I didn't have to, think about the fees. So that was helpful for me.
Thank you, Nitima. Sarah.
Yeah, so the short answer is that I had a research project that I was really passionate about and I wanted to see through. So towards the end of my undergrad and during my master's, which I completed in 2018, I really fell in love with being in school and doing scholarship and having the space to think and learn and write in really deep ways. So grad school gave me, some financial stability and the space to be able to do that. And I was able to carry through, these questions that I had about my project into the PhD.
Thank you very much. So our next question is, why did you choose York University? Margaret?
But for me, I chose York University based on fit. And I think fit with my own area of research interest, like as Sarah was saying, you come in with these interests, and then it's an opportunity to find researchers who also share, faculty who also share some of your interests. So for me, this was sort of at the intersections of women's studies and nursing and public health. And so I was able to find my own supervisor, Dr. McDonnell, who studies in these areas. And it was just a great match. And it was also, for me, a continuation of some of the relationships that I had started to build in my master's program with Dr. McDonnell. And so I wanted to continue those relationships in the PhD program, which I just thought would be a good opportunity for me to solidify some of my learning and also just progress.
Thank you so much. Ariella?
I chose York because it was the one university that really had exactly the program of study that I was interested in. For my undergrad, it was the place where I could study education from a religious perspective, where I could study children's rights. And then as a graduate student, it was a place where I could combine the three things that I'm really passionate about into one degree. And it's a very unique program. I don't think that it's found elsewhere.
Okay, thank you. And that's for people, our audience, that's just a reminder, that's interdisciplinary studies. It's currently a 2-year master's program with a thesis at the end. Okay, how did you decide which program was right for you? Nitima?
Yeah, so I had my background in environmental studies from India, so therefore I wanted to pursue my further studies in the same background. So at York, there was a master's program in environmental studies, and I wanted to pursue that. And then for my PhD, while doing my master's, I also did an environmental education diploma, and I made connections in the Faculty of Education, which really helped me to decide that this program, the PhD with the Faculty of Education, would be the best for me.
And Ariella, do you want to add anything there? Yeah.
So I saw the tagline for interdisciplinary studies was, this is the program for students who already know what they want to do and what they want to study, and they just need a place to do it. And that seemed really perfect for me. I am a teacher. I have a BEd, I'm OCT certified, and I did teach full-time for 6 years after graduating. And then when I wanted to go back to school, I wanted to find a program where I could bring that along and combine that with other areas of interest for me. So I wanted to look at the classroom combined with feminism, combined with Judaism. So that's why I chose this program specifically that I'm in right now.
Okay, I'm going to stay with you and go to the next question, Ariella, and that is, what kind of research did you do? Who did you talk to? Just tell us just a little bit about that process of your research.
So I spoke to Jewish women who live in Toronto who identify as being modern Orthodox, which is a subsect of Judaism. There's a lot of different streams of Judaism. And when I spoke to these women, I wanted to know about their childhood prayer experiences, because in Jewish day schools, prayer is a part of the curriculum and it's a very strong focus. And I wanted to know, as young girls growing up in that day school system, did they have chances to participate in the prayers in an active way? Was it different from what the boys got to do? Did that change as they got older? How involved were they? So it's a lot about equity and about opportunity.
Thank you. And I know you could say way more, and we've asked you all to be brief, so thank you. Sarah, why don't you tell us a little bit about that for you?
Yeah, so for my project, I was interested in sort of rereading self-harm as, instead of something that is seen as a pathological and very individualized practice, I was interested in situating, what is a very personal practice within sort of structural contexts. So I ended up doing a qualitative mixed method study. So this included a survey portion, a qualitative survey portion, which was circulated online, and then a series of one-to-one semi-structured interviews. So in terms of the institutional, side of the research process, like all research studies go through a research ethics board approval. And I spoke with a range of women, trans, and non-binary folks over the age of 18 who live in Canada and who have lived experience of self-harm. So because I undertook my fieldwork during COVID, all of my interviews were entirely online. And then after I interviewed, you go through the process of transcription and analysis, and I'm using in vivo software to facilitate my thematic analysis of the data. And I'm currently in the writing dash analysis stage of the project.
Yeah, the thick of it, for sure. Thank you. Okay, did your undergraduate degree prepare you for grad school in the program you're in specifically? Back to you, Sarah.
Yes, my journey through grad school in a lot of ways has been quite linear. I did an undergraduate degree in women's studies and sociology at Western University, and then a master's of arts in women's studies from Western University, and then straight into the PhD. So I have just been kind of barreling through without breaks. So I'm very much in the yes. I was academically prepared for the PhD. Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. Ariella, do you want to add?
It did prepare me, but it was also different in the sense that in my undergrad, it was more of a straight path. I was doing concurrent education at York, so specifically focusing on educational practices and educational theory. And then for my children's studies, children's rights, it was very much about research with children. So when I started my master's, it was more of a different way of thinking about those subjects.
Mm-hmm.
It was more broad, but I did feel prepared.
And the linearity part?
It was connected, but I will say that the master's degree has been different just in the mindset.
Yeah.
More of a flexible thinking approach.
Mm-hmm. A little less structured. You sort of have to be the driver at times.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, at York, we talk about the value of real world experiences, lived experiences, bringing that in. And that doesn't mean you have to be 40 to go to grad school. It just means that we want you to fold it in to how you define your project and maybe some of the work or some of the recommendations you end up making. So let's talk about that a little bit with Margaret. I'll just pose the question. How have or will real world experiences help me? Remember, these are questions coming from prospective students. Help me as a grad student. Alternatively, would I be better prepared for this program with real world experience first? Margaret.
Thank you, Cheryl. Yeah, I can only speak from my own experience, which is in nursing. And so, contrary to some other disciplines, nursing is an applied field, although there are like several applied fields, obviously, education, Ariella has sort of touched on this, and social work, etc. In nursing, it's very common for, at least in the contemporary time, it's common for nurses to be in practice and then to go back to school to get their master's or PhD. And I think it's often the case that perhaps the questions that come out of practice from our practice experiences working with patients and clients, with other organizations. It stimulates many provocative questions that we want to answer. And so these become then these passionate questions that are very suitable for master's thesis work or doctoral work. But on the same, or on the other side of the coin, I don't necessarily think that, as the question implies, is it necessary to have work experience? I mean, I don't necessarily think so always. Certainly you can find questions that would relate to disciplines, my discipline being nursing. You can find these questions through personal experience for sure, through familial experience in one's own family or close friends and things like that. That would be true. And also through volunteer work, other work in the community, and just living day to day. I mean, we're all people, so we all have very valuable experiences, very legitimate experiences. And I just made some notes too, that thinking about, the more we're able to document some of these experiences, put them in journals, and as you prepare and think about the questions that you want to answer, this is one way I think that we can come to a more, maybe meticulous observation of the world and what's around us. These all create really good questions for graduate studies, I think.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of gets at one of the questions in the chat, which we may be able to get to in a little while. So thank you. So the long-winded way of saying, the short-winded way of saying it is, if you're interested, that means you're interested. That means you've got a burning question, or you want to have a burning question, or really you want to make a diff. You want to do something that makes a difference. And for sure, York being a social justice university, that's what we want to see. Come on in, talk to us. What inspires you? What worries you? What do you want to contribute to? And then you get people to wrap around you and help that happen. Okay, next question. So far, what has been the most memorable part of your graduate student journey? Nitima.
Yeah, so for me, I would say the most memorable part was making connections at York. So I was new, I didn't know anybody in Canada when I came here. So York gave me that opportunity to make new connections as a graduate student. And those important connections that I made played a very important role in the academic and professional journey of mine. And I also learned so much from all those people that I met. And they contributed a lot in helping me to grow and evolve, both as a student and as an individual. And I met some amazing people, and I'm very thankful to York for giving me this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you very much. How about you, Sarah? So far, most memorable.
Yeah, I had a hard time picking one. The PhD is so long and you go through so many different lives with it. At the beginning, you're sort of more enmeshed with your cohort and you make a lot of connections with your classmates. So similar to Nitima, the connections that I've been able to make with cohort members, but also networking at conferences, you meet people that have similar interests and then you get talking and it's all just very exciting and stimulating. On the research side of things, my field work has been really hard to describe, but a very powerful experience that I wouldn't have had otherwise outside of the PhD. So the opportunity to do research with folks and share experiences with them and hear about the realities of their lives has been really moving.
Thank you very much. Well, let's talk money, shall we? We'll talk a little bit about, do we know that there are scholarships and awards that exist? Let's hear from Margaret first.
Yeah, there are a range of scholarships that exist. There are too many really to list all of them here today, but I would encourage everyone who's interested in looking at the scholarship opportunities to check out the webpage, which I'm sure maybe you have already. It's Scholarships and Bursaries webpage. on the future students at York University. It's a really helpful place to give a great overview of what is available, and there are such meticulous differences between, you know, what qualifications or who's suitable for which awards. So it's important to look closely at that. But of course, I can speak a little bit to the well-known national and provincial scholarships. So these you may have heard of, some of the national funding bodies being, you know, Social Science and Humanities Research Council, the Canadian Institutes for Health Research, and the National Science and Engineering Research Council, if I'm not mistaken. So these are national funding bodies that you can apply to. And of course, there are Ontario graduate scholarships as well. And these I would encourage everyone to think about applying to, because you could get substantial funding for your studies, number one. And there are a few time points, I guess, that you could apply to these. So I think obviously the opportunity exists before your first year or before you're admitted, you can apply, and also subsequently. So it's not, you know, necessarily one time and that's it. You can have multiple opportunities. And for me, I really appreciated the opportunity to use it's an intense process to apply for some of these scholarships. So I should say that up front, and nothing to be sort of put together over a weekend. I think it takes a lot longer than that. And certainly people who've been successful, I've heard this from them in the past, they say, it's taken maybe a year to prepare. So like the planning for applying for the scholarship maybe can take up to a year. But something to consider is to use the opportunity for when you're applying for the scholarship as an opportunity to refine and focus your research proposal. In general, anyway, with SSHRC, or the Social Science and Humanities Research Council, it's been a two-page research proposal, which of course then if you can refine that into kind of a research proposal abstract, that's something then that I found very helpful for then actually developing my real proposal. And it can change, of course, that's totally acceptable, but it's something to think about. You get a few things out of doing the application process. So yeah, something to think about.
Yeah, I like the focus on refining your thinking by force. Oh God, it's due. I better figure this out. Yeah. Sarah, why don't you talk a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, so I've received financial support at a few different levels. So I came into the program with the SSHRC doctoral fellowship, as Margaret mentioned, and I will echo the sentiment that it is definitely worth applying, if only because then you have a very clearly articulated kind of grounding document to follow you through your PhD. So I know when it came time for me to submit my dissertation proposal, my SSHRC proposal was a keystone document in my dissertation proposal, because I was articulating and interested in very similar questions. So the external funding bodies are always available and definitely worth applying to. And then there's internal scholarships as well. So I know in my graduate program, there are internal awards that grad students can apply for through the department. So depending on the department that you're applying for, your individual program will have funding and bursaries for conferences and some money based on student financial need that is available. And then there's other kinds of internal funding within the university. So I think YUGSA and FGS, the Faculty of Graduate Studies, both have kind of bodies of money for grad students in terms of, conference travel, professional development, student need fund. So there are definitely pockets, and then some larger pockets as well. So I'm in the 5th year of my PhD, and this year, because my SSHRC fellowship was up, SSHRC is generally 4 years. I applied for the Susan Mann Dissertation Scholarship, which is a larger scholarship that is offered through the Faculty of Graduate Studies, and so that's how I'm supporting myself this year. So there are definitely pockets of money around that always apply for. Yes.
Now, I know you were mentioning one of them is called Academic Excellence Fund, and I think Ariella, you applied to that. Can you just talk a little bit about what you applied to it for?
Sure. I'll echo what Sarah said, which is that there are pockets of funding, which is important to know about, and it's important to take advantage of if you're able to do so. So one of the things is the Academic Excellence Fund, which you can apply for, and they'll look at your transcript, they'll see what your grades have been like, and it's important because it could give you funding that will help you in your research. It could give you funding that will help you in your different scholarly activities.
Yeah, fantastic. Like even honoraria or
Right. So for example, if I was buying material, if I was buying a recording, if I was buying a recording device for my research, if I was trying to fund transportation to get to a certain location to speak with certain participants, that could also be covered. There is an online transcription service if you're wanting to have access to that. These are all things that the funding that you get from the Academic Excellence Fund would be able to help you out with and potentially to cover the cost, which is really helpful as a researcher, as a student researcher.
Yeah. And I can say too that for all these fine people, they didn't know this when they started. They learned it as they came along by talking to people and asking questions. So if you're beginning to get overwhelmed, like, there's so much, you just learn as you need and find out stuff as you need. Okay. Are any of you teaching assistants is a question? And if so, what's the overall time commitment to teaching each week? Let's hear from Nitima first.
So yes, I worked as a TA both in my master's and my PhD. So usually the time commitment is like 10 hours per week, but in some weeks it could be with the marking and stuff, it could be 12 to 13 hours, whereas in others it could be 6 to 9 hours, but overall it would be 135 hours for a term or a semester. And I would suggest like always ask for a TA workload form from the course director and like discuss the TA workload form. So that's important.
Mm-hmm. And for our participants, have a look in the chat because our communications director is popping in important info for you that links to what our panelists are saying. Thanks, Nitima. I might circle back to you a little bit about being a TA in a second, but Sarah, why don't you speak a little bit about your experience?
Yes, I TA'd for 4 years. And I don't have much to add to what Nitima said. We are contracted for 10 hours a week. And so some of the duties as a TA are, attending lectures, preparing and planning and facilitating tutorials, grading student material, and corresponding with students. And so 10 hours sounds like a good chunk of time in a week. And given the amount of work that we must do as TAs to do the job well, it is hard to fit it all in. So the time management is really key with the TA-ship. And I've also had a chance to work as a research assistant, and that's, a similar thing. You're contracted for a certain number of hours a week, and that's a little bit more, you would coordinate that with a professor, an individual professor, whereas TAs are sort of facilitated through, TA-ships are facilitated through the department and are considered part of our funding package.
Yeah, they're connected. Margaret, I wasn't sure, did you TA?
Sure. Well, I only started this year actually. So in my
Okay.
3rd year, I started. Yeah. Yeah, so I've had a small experience so far, but a good experience. And I felt like this was the right time for me to sort of start exploring some teaching in my 3rd year after sort of getting through the hurdle of the coursework. Yeah, so that was good. And I have to say I'm really fond of the Teaching Commons, so a really good support network of teaching and learning at York University, and they really do support TAs. So a lot of different workshops have been very valuable for me, even as I've just sort of started to explore this area this year.
And I like what Sarah said in terms of that it's attached to one's funding, but if one does not wish to be a TA, then they don't have as much funding. They say maybe they're going to work more hours in another job, so they just want to focus on their PhD and that other stuff. For others, they want a TA, and that ups their income coming in from the university. I think we have time to circle about the research assistant that Sarah mentioned. Why don't we, I know this is off the cuff, So I haven't asked any of you to get ready for this, but Sarah, you've been an RA. Ariella, you've been an RA. Nitima, have you been an RA? Okay, and Margaret, have you? You have. Okay, well, why don't we just go around just off the cuff. What is a research assistant? What did you do? And maybe was it, fingers crossed, helpful to you? Let's start with Sarah.
Yeah, so I've had the opportunity to hold a few different RA-ships, and those I came across because I had relationships with professors who were looking for grad students to help them. So my first RA-ship came from a professor in the gender studies department who I did a directed reading course with, and that was, you know, assisting with some data analysis. She had a data set that she needed some support in getting through. So I helped with that. I've also had RA-ships or graduate assistantships, which are slightly less research focused, but you're, you know, still supporting the work of profs in the at York. So one of my RA-ships / GA-ships was more geared towards, we planned a research event. So that was, you know, organizing and facilitating. I've also had a GA-ship that was geared towards running a social media page for a SSHRC-funded research project that, you know, a professor I knew needed someone who knew how to use Instagram. And then one recent one was more research focused, and that was conducting a literature review of a body of work that supported the writing of a paper. So there's lots of different ways to do it. The through line for me is that I happened to be at the right place at the right time and said yes to the work. So that's how I came across my RA-ships and some of the work that I've done.
Thanks. I didn't know you had so many. Thank you, Ariella. Sorry, thank you, Sarah. Over to you, Ariella.
I'm an RA, and that means for me, the topic of the research that I'm assisting with is about mental health for girls. So I've been conducting focus groups and interviews with girls on the topic of what mental health means to them. And it's been an amazing positive experience. I got to be in different schools and different situations that I never would have been in before. I got to meet people that I would never have met aside from this. The best moments, honestly, of being an RA was at the end of the interviews when the girls would sometimes say, "We never get a chance to talk about this. Thank you so much for coming. We wish we had more opportunities to talk about what mental health means to us." And it's also been really helpful for me personally in my own research, because the things that I do as a research assistant, I can then replicate in my own research. So I'm kind of learning on the job. I learned about how to hold a focus group, and now in my own research, that's what I'm doing. I learned good interview practices, and then I put that into practice with my own research. It also, my things that the duties include some amount of data analysis. So when I practice that and when I work on that for my research assistant position, I can then apply the skills that I learned to analyze my own transcripts.
Fabulous. Thank you. And by the way, there's money attached to GA-ships and RA-ships, in case our participants didn't understand that it wasn't just labor. Okay, Nitima, we have time just to hear from you a little bit, and then we're going to move on.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I did a few RA-ships in my PhD. So the first one started with a reference that one of my professors gave for me, and then it was related to my work. So I was ready to do it voluntarily, but I was lucky enough, and the professor was really good that they offered me an RA-ship. So it was related to sustainable development goals and how we infuse sustainable development goals in your classrooms and courses. So it also helped me in understanding the process and how it happens at higher education institutes. So it helped me with my research as well. So I also developed, co-developed a website. So that was a great opportunity for me because I never thought that I would be able to develop that. So, but I did that. I'm in the process of also developing another one. So the one RA-ship that I did gave me the opportunity to apply in the process of applying for another one with a team of professors. So we got that funding, and I was again hired as a research assistant in the other project, and I'm now working as a project coordinator for that project. And I'm also doing another RShip. So right now I'm doing 2 RShips. That's with one of the professors with which I worked in my master's. So that's on 7 generations and how climate solutions and 7 generation work. We collaborate on that and how that works. So that is on Markham. I do some interviews with local people in Markham. So yeah, so that's my.
So lots, and really, what I want folks to take away from this is it's optional. It provides more money, but it's also meant to propel you and your graduate skills. It's not meant to be one-sided. It's meant to be reciprocal. It benefits the faculty and their project, but it really is meant to benefit the graduate student. Okay, let's go to our next question. And folks want to know, what are some of the differences between graduate and undergraduate school? And as a grad student, did you participate in any activities that enhance your student experience? So kind of a two-sided question. So Ariella, we'll start with you there.
Okay, so to answer the second question of what activities enhanced my student experience. So there was an interdisciplinary studies social event, which I went to, and I also volunteered at a little bit. And it was great to just connect with other people from my program and find things that we had in common, see them in person, not on a screen. We have a WhatsApp group, which we're just kind of constantly in contact. Someone can shoot a question, other people can say a response if, something happens, and it's wish each other Happy New Year, things like that. So that's really nice. There was an art event, which I wanted to go, but I didn't end up attending, but I'll go to the next one. So just things like that, just the small experiences, I feel that build connection are what's really important and what really enhanced my experience personally. And then to answer the first question of what are some differences between graduate and undergraduate school. So a big difference for me is that undergraduate school, it was largely taking courses, and you have to take a certain amount and a certain type of courses. Whereas graduate program, there are courses that you need to take, but a lot of it is your own research. And a lot of it is that you're building your own schedule on your own timetable according to your topic.
Thank you. Very helpful. Sarah, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so in terms of the difference between undergraduate school and graduate school, I would say that the number one difference is the workload expectation, for me at least. So much more reading in grad school, and different expectations for engagement with the material too. Like we're not just memorizing things, we're here to do scholarship. Another thing I would say is, in terms of my own understanding, I tend to treat grad school like a job. So we're seen as emerging scholars and as young, or not young, sometimes young, but mature, like all across the life course, I guess. But we're professionals in a work environment, and so we're learning as a student, but we're also teaching, and we hold work positions, and then we're also responsible for our own research and our own project management. So there's a bit of a difference in the role expectations in terms of what you do on campus and why you're there. And as Ariella said, it is, I think the difference for in terms of being the driver of your own project, really, is different than undergrad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, no, say more, Sarah.
Oh, I was just going to speak to in terms of the activities that enhance student experience. I've been a part of a few councils and the Women's Studies Grad Student Association. It's really going to things. That's hard. It's hard post-COVID, and for a while most events were online, but things are slowly starting to happen on campus now. So attending research cluster gatherings or going to book launches. So the Center for Feminist Research is one place on campus that has a lot of events that are, for graduate students and for the scholarly community at York. But there's all kinds of organized research units that do work to facilitate, the social and the intellectual life on campus.
Okay, fantastic. So a pragmatic question came in to us. So what's the local area like? The housing, the food, the transportation on campus? Let's go to Nitima.
Yeah, so for the housing, I would say I came to know that there are graduate apartments, and I applied for that are available for graduate students. You can apply online for those apartments, and then there is a wait time. So yeah, so I would say that. And then for the transportation, I would say I personally feel that the public transit system was really good before the pandemic, and that was also one reason that I chose York for. There are TTC and Brampton Transit buses that come to the campus, and also there is a subway station, so which can connect you to Toronto and other and Vaughan and other places. And also there are GO buses and other transit system in the Pioneer Village subway station and 407 subway station. So yeah, there is public transit here.
Awesome. And there's also Wheel-Trans that comes often to York. That's transportation for persons who have mobility struggles. Sarah, how about you?
So I am someone who lives downtown and commutes to campus on the subway. So the subway existing makes commuting very easy. And I've heard from previous students who tell me I'm so lucky that I started at York after the subway station was built. And the food options on campus are good too. There were a lot more pubs on campus pre-COVID. They've sort of closed down now, which is really sad. And I think we're feeling the lack of gathering spaces as graduate students, informal gathering spaces. But there are places to gather and there are places to eat on campus and to take a break, especially compared to previous campuses I've been on. York has far more food options than other schools I've been to.
They actually redid the food options in what we call York lanes to be more representative of our student body and our faculty and staff. Okay, this is a question for all of you. Did you ever feel burned out? And how do you deal with the feeling of being overwhelmed or maybe behind? Let's start with Margaret.
Yeah, the short answer is yes. I've definitely felt burnt out and have felt that way, at different points in the journey. I think there's just ebbs and flows, and naturally there's some times when there's a lot of work to be done at different periods of time. I guess solutions, how do I deal with it, or how have I found what works and what doesn't work? I think sort of thinking about reflecting and journaling has been important for me. I'll be honest and say sometimes I think I felt, in these times of feeling overwhelmed, it's easy to kind of get into like a rut, sort of, where you sort of feel discouraged or overwhelmed. And so for me personally, sometimes what I would do is, relax at those periods of times, because I'm just sort of like, I need a break now. But maybe relaxing a bit too much, or maybe for a few too many days, and then feeling like guilty that I'm not actually working on something. And that too was problematic, because then, if that cycle continues, then I would start feeling at times like, oh, I'm relaxing and I'm feeling guilty, and I'm feeling guilty because I'm not working. So these things feed off of each other, and then I'm not really relaxing at all, and then I'm not really working at all. So it was really a bit problematic for a while. And so I guess to try to remedy this, I've really thought about doing small things to start. If I'm feeling overwhelmed, be generous to myself and take that day, or take, the 2 days of the weekend. As Sarah says, this is like a job. You should treat it as such. But of course, sometimes we're trying to fit in, graduate studies in different, in different spaces in our lives. We're all busy, especially for mature students. Sometimes this is especially true. But what you can do, I think, is try to tackle the small little bits, little chunks at a time. So, what are those things? And you'll know what they are. And I, for myself, I sometimes feel like, oh my gosh, like I'll start just by editing the references, something like this, because I just find that propels me forward. And starting with something small like that, or a little piece that you remember, oh, this is engaging, I remember that, let me check that. And of course, then that will help a lot. So I think those are my suggestions.
Thank you so much. Yeah, a lot of nodding was happening as you were speaking. Let's hear from Ariella.
I would say that burnout probably happens for me when I'm confused about something, like I've tried to write something and rewrite, and I'm still not really understanding how to do it, or I've been trying to work on a certain thing and my instincts keep being wrong about it. So it helps honestly for me to speak to one of my supervisors about it. It helps if I make a list and, like what Margaret said, just try to accomplish one small thing that I do understand and that I can do well, because that can kind of spin off into realizing more confidence. Oh, if I did this, then I can just take one more step beyond that. And after a while, I can get it done. But on the other hand, sometimes what helps is just to take a break, walk outside in nature, and come back to it the next day with a fresh mind and maybe a different perspective.
Yeah, and Ariella is very organized too. So that's one of, all of you have fantastic strengths, but you have a real strength in terms of being organized and structuring time to do nothing, structuring time with family and loved ones, and being offline too. Really important kind of thing. Yeah.
Important.
Yeah. So thank you. Sarah, how about you? Burned out ever?
Yes, burnout is real. And something I really struggled with in grad school, and I think a lot of grad students struggle with, is like the push crash cycle. So you push really, really hard, and then you meet that deadline or submit that paper or whatever, and then you crash for like a week, and then you're just in your pajamas watching Netflix and can't do anything. So learning how to set better boundaries around my work. So, that better boundaries in terms of, I make sure that I take my weekends off completely, but also like I make sure that I at least sit down at my desk and, fiddle with something that feels less overwhelming, so that I am still connected to the work. So that is really a process that, has taken me 5 years to learn, and I'm still practicing it. But it's also, it's a marathon. The PhD is really a marathon, and sometimes you reach a season in the PhD where it makes more sense to just give yourself a month to recuperate, which is something that I did this past summer. I just, sometimes you just straight up need a break, and that's okay too. And grad school, it's a competitive environment. It breeds a scarcity mindset. We feel like we need to say yes to absolutely everything, or else we'll never get the opportunity again. And so learning to say no to things as well is another really important skill for mitigating burnout.
Thank you. I'm learning so much. Nitima.
Yes, so like everybody else, I have felt that a lot of times, both in my master's and my PhD, because also I'm a mom. So there are times when I have my assignments, I have my proposal to make, I have my fieldwork to do, and I also have a little one, I have the dishes, I have the laundry to do. So yes, so there are situations, and especially when the pandemic hit, I was almost about to leave for my fieldwork. So that was a kind of a scary situation for me. But I think what helped me is like talking to my supervisor, talking to my advisor, and then talking to the course directors and telling them like what I'm facing, and like asking them for like a much more time or a little more time. That really helped me. And also talking to my peers and like the cohort, the students in my cohort, that was really helpful because they shared their own stories and like what helped them. So that also helped me in understanding that this is just a phase, and mostly everybody goes through it. So yeah, it will pass. And I think things happen in life, and like everybody has been very understanding at York and very supportive. And I just took that extra time I got, and I took rest, I recharged myself, and then I was back.
Yeah, and that leads to the next question that some of our pre-panelists had or pre-participants had, and that was around mental wellness. And are there supports on campus around mental health, mental wellness, and well-being? Sarah, can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes. So there is on-campus mental health services. There's a few different facets. So when I first came to York, I went into, this was 2018, I went into the on-campus mental health services, and they offer services to both undergraduate and graduate students. Did an intake with someone and then realized that that was only short term. They can only see students for so many weeks, and I needed something that was longer term. So then I turned to my benefits package, which we get as grad students through our QP unionized work. And the benefits package at York, specifically for mental health care, is fantastic. We, not to get into how the benefits, the ins and outs of the benefits package, but you can get up to $2,000 a year to cover counseling. And there is a fund available to top up if you go past that amount through YUGSA. So we are definitely financially supported in seeking ongoing mental health care off campus here at York as TAs. And the grad student wellness consultations are available as well. I haven't myself gone through those because I've taken a different route for my care, but they are available, and there are counselors in FGS that can connect grad students to services that are available on campus. So yeah, it does exist.
Yeah, and that's a pretty relatively new service that the Faculty of Grad Studies has, and that's mental health supports, wellness supports specific for grad, confidential support specific for grad, and the counselors are qualified, confidential, compassionate. Okay, well, thank you for that. Thank you for the additional layer of you, Sarah, being so generous and sharing a bit of self. I always say mental health is something, ever stepping forward to get any supports is a sign of courage, not a sign of weakness. So let's talk about, mental well-being and a social life, and they're so linked, right? How do you keep a social life as a grad student? And if you want, you can talk about how you did that during the pandemic. I don't know about you, but I'm tired about talking about it. But let's talk about social life a little bit from Ariella. How do you keep a social life as a grad student?
So some of the things I did was, if I had a Zoom class with someone, if I was on a Zoom class and I was maybe messaging someone in the chat, we realized we had a lot in common, we would stay on afterwards and we would just kind of keep talking, or we would talk about something else, like if we were in the same group for a group project or something. Or I would have a friend over in the height of the pandemic, and we would both be wearing masks and sitting at opposite sides of my table, and we'd both be kind of co-working. Or I'd go to a sibling's house and the same sort of situation, like in masks, and we're just both kind of doing our own thing, taking a walk with someone outside. Also just kind of taking advantage of the opportunities that come along with having a slightly more flexible schedule. Like there's an online thing or there's a class and suddenly I'm randomly available at 11 o'clock in the morning, and I can just I can continue with my transcripts later, or I can do them earlier. So I just have to seek out opportunities basically to be social and take advantage of them when I find them.
Mm-hmm. And Sarah, how about you?
So for me, socializing as a grad student looks different, depending on where you're at in your degree. So at the beginning of the PhD, it was, much easier to be social with cohort members and classmates because we're together, doing coursework and being on campus. And then as you kind of move through the degree, you're done coursework, folks are kind of off doing their own thing, and it does get harder to stay in touch. So in terms of socializing in that case, attending department or program events, going to writing groups on campus, starting a writing group. And, you know, your departmental student associations should be hosting social events as well that, you know, you can go to and remain connected with folks in your program. And so socializing within grad school is one thing, and then keeping hobbies and interests and connections outside of school is another very, very important piece, because it gives you a sense of community and identity outside of work, because grad school is not our entire lives. So, you know, having friends that you can, you know, go to the gym with or play video games with, or, you know, whatever, it's equally as important to put energy into that too, and keep in touch with your cohort members, because it is so easy to start to feel alone, and they're an essential branch of support, especially as you get into the later stages of your PhD.
Thank you for that. And I just want to take a moment and say thank you for all the work that you've done contributing to this discussion and preparing your answers, everybody. I know we're clicking along, but I just want you to know we're very grateful. So there's a question folks want to understand. They say, I hear there's a graduate student council sort of thing at York. Are any of you a part of it? And what do these kind of councils do? So Margaret, can you give us some information about that?
Sure, yeah. I can tell you that, you know, this is the YUGSA, as you've heard referred to earlier, or the York University Graduate Students Association, YUGSA, and you can find them yugsa.ca. So they are the student council, as you've heard. And I guess, you know, let me just read. They provide advocacy and support to all members across various graduate departments on campuses. And then some departments, like you heard Sarah say, have their own graduate student associations. And essentially what they do is they also work with others. You know, they have some funding opportunities, and sort of as their mission, you know, they work to oppose the continued commercialization of Canadian universities. They participate in the broad-based movement demanding accessible, public, fully funded, high-quality post-secondary education. And so for me personally, I've been involved with YUGSA in a small way. I was part of the health plan committee in 2022. So they were looking at well, unfortunately, they were looking at doing some health plan changes that were initiated by the provider or the insurance provider. And so we want to assess what would be best for the members. And so this involved doing a survey of the membership and what would be, you know, what could we assess as reasonable changes to make. So yeah, so this is one thing you can get involved. I mean, they have monthly council meetings, generally speaking, and you can learn new things. So, I mean, just last week I attended and I learned that there will be there are some proposed changes coming to formats for the dissertation. So this is kind of good information to gather, like, plus plenty of other things.
Yeah, widening what we count as a dissertation format is coming, yeah, to different programs that want that. Cool. Because knowledge lives in a variety of formats, doesn't it? It's not all just linear words. Okay, terrific. Let's talk a little bit about being either an international student or a newcomer to Canada, which is a large portion of our graduate students at York. And so the question is, either as an international student or as a newcomer to Canada, how did you integrate into Canadian culture? Were there welcoming resources and services provided at York? And I think Nitima wants to tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So I was not an international student, but I was kind of international. I faced the challenges of an international student, and I had no prior Canadian education, and I was a newcomer. But the system was new to me. But I think there were a lot of resources that helped me to integrate into the new culture. The orientations that happened were really beneficial for me during my master's to understand how the system runs, how the programs, how the courses have to be taken, how do I even register? So that was really important, those orientations. Then the supervisory meetings that I had with my supervisor were very helpful, and the weekly updates from York and the faculty were important in letting me know like what's happening, what I need to do. So that was really amazing. And I also had amazing classmates and very supportive faculty that helped me. And specifically, I would say that the writing support center that we had and the library services were very helpful. They helped me in improving my writing skills according to the Canadian academic standards, because in like different countries, there are different ways in how you write, and to know like what happens here in Canadian Academic Institute. So I had to learn that. So the Writing Support Center really helped me. So I could provide them with one of my writing samples, and then they would provide me their feedback. And we had one-to-one meeting with them. So they told me that I need to change it, because there are even a few words that we think in like in Indian perspective that was fine, but like when I wrote them over here, so they were not this, they didn't have the same meaning. So I have to change those. So it really helped me that way. And then also the library services. So there were different modules that I was introduced to, and then also there were library support. That was like I could book an appointment with one of the librarians, and they would let me know like how can I find resources, because that was something new to me. In the Indian universities that I did my undergrad and my grad studies, we didn't have that resources, online resources. We always went to the library and found a book or any resource, but there were not many digital resources. So that was kind of a new thing for me, and I had to learn how to effectively find resources for my academic work. So that really helped me a lot.
Thank you. And check out the chat, everybody. There's lots of good information in there about all kinds of events that we host, and also the centrality of York International being such a massive support in every possible way for students that are international. Okay, how independent is the research that students do? Do students work together, or do they work with a supervisor? Let's hear from Ariella about that one.
It's ultimately independent, but you're not by yourself. So I'll give an example. We used to, in my first year, we had a class with everyone in the interdisciplinary program. And it was actually one of the students in that class who really helped me to clarify my research questions. I was struggling with that. And he said to me, listen, let's just sit down and let's go through this. And that's when I really had clarity. Also, in regards to supervisors, so I do have 3 supervisors, one for each of my disciplines. So education, religion, gender feminist studies. And I do work with them, each of them very closely, and I get advice from them. I run things by them. So I'm not by myself, although it is a very independent process.
Yeah. And Sarah, why don't you tell us a bit about that too? Thank you, Ariella.
In a lot of ways, I think that the independence of your research really depends on the discipline that you're in and the program that you're in and the supervisor that you have. So I know in my case, I'll echo what Ariella said, like it is independent research, but you're not alone. So while I came in with an idea for my study and I designed the study, and all of that was done in consultation with my supervisor and my committee. So, you always have folks that will look over your work and give you guidance and feedback on your work. And at the end of the day, in my experience, it has been very independent, and I have been the one to kind of take the reins on applying to conferences and publishing papers and getting the work done. So it is a collective effort that is also individual. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and remember too, when you have a supervisor, this is for our folks listening in, when you have a supervisor, you have to ask for what you want. And sometimes you don't know till you're in the relationship, and maybe you want more guidance. Maybe you want, hey, I need a little less, or give me some breathing space, or I don't understand this. Can we meet again and you explain this to me again? Or can you just read this with me so I feel confident? And so that should be a constant communication back and forth around what you need as a grad student. And all of it is cool. There's no right way or wrong way to require more support or less support. It's just it's all good. So what's the overall time commitment to research each week? And of course, that depends on whether you're in the proposal phase, your lit review phase, are you in the field, are you in analysis? So let's hear from Sarah on that first, and then Ariella.
Yeah, so again, in terms of the time commitment, it depends on the phase that you're in of the dissertation, but also, your own life. So some grad students are part-time, some have familial obligations, some have full-time jobs, and they're balancing the PhD with that. So it really does depend on, kind of your own circumstances. For me, at this stage I'm in, which is the writing analysis stage, I'm treating it like a full-time job. So I'm essentially, 30 to 40 hours a week, maybe more, maybe less if I'm tired. So there are seasons where I am working a lot, and then there are seasons where I'm sort of, producing less, but then I'm, like reading and resting as part of work too, because your brain needs time to process information. So in the beginning also, it's not just your own research, you're balancing coursework and TA-ship commitments and any kind of service work that you're doing around the university. So committees you're on. So it really is a juggling act, and also it shifts over time as the PhD progresses.
Yeah, it does. Ariella, what is the overall time commitment to research each week? How do you want to help our participants understand that?
As you said, I feel that it really has varied for me. Sometimes if I'm waiting for ethics to get back to me, there's not a lot I could do. But if I'm in the middle of interviewing, then I just have a ton that I need to get through. But I would say as a general rule, I try and block off a few days each week or a certain amount of time each week. And I say, this is the time that I'm working on my thesis. And I make sure I don't have anything else going on that day so that I can really focus on it.
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't do that, then it really starts to pile up and it gets to be more difficult.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so look, we're at a great place right now. I just want to ask our panelists, if you need to have a drink of water, grab it. It's great. You've been talking for a long time. We have two questions that we're going to close with, but at this moment, there's a bunch of questions I understand are coming in to us. So I'm going to turn over to Inessa, who's going to run this portion for us. We don't know the questions, but I think there's some people who want to ask each of you something. So Inessa, over to you, friend.
Thank you so much. This has been such an amazing conversation, and I'm kind of sad that it's ending soon, but we do have some questions for each panelist, and I'm just going to read them out aloud and turn it over to the panelists. So Nitima, I'm going to actually start with you. One of our undergrad students said, your research focus has been around the UN SDGs, and I'm hearing a lot about that at York. I don't know much, but can you tell us a bit more about this and your research around the UN SDGs?
Yes, sure. So when I started working in my MES, so I was introduced to the Sustainable Development Goals. I also felt that these are just related to environment, but then when I read about them, I understood about them. So there are 17 goals that were introduced in 2015 by the United Nations, and they vary from taking into social issues, and then economic issues, and then environmental issues, and they are interconnected with each other. And for my own research in PhD, I'm looking into how universities address SDGs through their policies. How do they enact their policies, what they're doing, and how does that impact the student understanding and learning about SDGs? So if you don't know about SDGs much, so we are working towards integrating the UN SDGs and understanding about them in the orientations, and also working towards having a YU prep course that we could introduce in the coming years about SDGs, so that students can learn more about SDGs and how they can be more involved in working toward SDGs.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. Ariella, I have a question for you. How did you know how to discover the interdisciplinary area of study that you chose? And do you have to have a Bachelor of Arts in those areas that you chose?
In regards to do you have to have a Bachelor of Arts in those areas, you don't necessarily. I know that interdisciplinary studies does also value real lived experiences or work experiences in certain cases, I would say it's certainly helpful to have that undergraduate, to have an arts degree in something relevant, because you need to also prove that you're coming in and you're able to hit the ground running. You do have at least some of the background knowledge that's required. Sorry, what was the other question? Is how did I find the interdisciplinary studies program?
Yeah, like how did you choose your areas of studies within this program?
Oh, okay. Well, I was kind of looking at the York website and see what is offered at the master's level, and I wanted it to incorporate children's rights and girlhood and equity studies and religion and Judaism specifically, and I was trying to find a way kind of to make that all work together. So when I found the Interdisciplinary Studies website and it says that you can choose 3 disciplines, then I had to look through all the individual disciplines that York had that seemed relevant to me and find the 3 that would encompass what I was interested in studying. So there are some people in my program who are studying politics, and their research is also about food, and they're also putting on a stage play. So every person in my program has 3 things that you might not think are connected, but they're connecting it based on their own research.
Very cool. Margaret, I'm going to turn it over to you. Here's the question that we received. I believe you mentioned you are a public health nurse. First of all, thank you for your service. Question is, how were you able to juggle this during the pandemic, your professional role, and your academic role?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's a juggling act for sure. There's no doubt about that. And what I can say is, in many ways, I think what helped me persevere throughout this, challenging and juggling time was I end up finding the graduate studies to be a bit of a reprieve, honestly, from the work that I was doing during the pandemic. So it's very, like, as a nurse rather. So it's quite different work and thinking about different things, especially doing the coursework piece where you're still reading articles that are maybe not things that you would necessarily pick out on your own or related to related to my job. So this was stimulating in a very different way that I found quite helpful. But in terms of, I guess, juggling, 2 things stand out for me. One was around planning. So, I mean, I applied before the pandemic began, so I didn't really know this would be a thing. And so in the summer before I started, I was scrambling to think about how can I really plan this out. And I don't know that this is for everyone, but I did end up taking a project management course, which, it can be good in some ways to think about how do you distill a project down into many, many small pieces and just sort of plan the end and then work backwards. That's been very helpful. And to that same end, I was trying to carve out time periods throughout the day when I could do work. And for me, finding what works and finding out what works early was helpful. So I would normally wake up at 7 to 9 would be the time I would do the bulk of my studying or writing. And then after that, I would just transition to work. And I was, lucky in my role at that time, working from home. So that's how I managed usually.
Thanks so much, Margaret. Sarah, I've got a question for you. The Gender, Feminist, and Women's Studies program is certainly one of a kind. Can you tell us how you decided on this program? Was it related to your undergraduate studies, or is it other experiences? We do have 2 or 3 people watching us that are very interested in the program at the master's level.
Yeah, hi. This is a great question. I decided on this program because I came from a background of gender studies. So I did my undergrad in gender studies with a double major in sociology, and then my master's in gender studies. So I was drawn to the program at York because it is, it's one of the oldest, I think maybe the oldest gender studies program in Canada. And the opportunities that the program gave me to connect with scholars in the field. So one thing that I'm drawn to with gender studies is I knew that my project was rooted in a feminist ethic, and I needed a graduate program that would support that very clearly. And I'm supported in working across departments too. So my supervisor is cross-listed in gender studies, but her primary faculty is the Faculty of Health. And my committee members, one of them is in the School of Disability Studies, and one of them is in political science, the School of Politics. And I'm housed in gender studies. So the gender studies program is, for me, it's a political fit. It feels right. It feels like home. And I'm very supported in moving across disciplines to collaborate with other kinds of scholars doing feminist work in different departments. And the gender studies program has other, it feels well networked. Like we have the Center for Feminist Research at York, which I think I mentioned, and that is also, very supportive to the gender studies students. And has a lot of programming that is geared towards, like queer and feminist events and scholarship. So it both made sense for me to go into the program here at York, and based on my political commitments, based on my academic history, and I knew that I would be supported in making connections across departments as well.
Thanks, Sarah. Ariella, we have one more question for you. Not sure if Ariella is a Sabbath observant, but I'm wondering, how did that work for you for missing a whole bunch of hours for the Jewish holidays?
Yeah, I can definitely speak to that. So I am a Sabbath observant Jew, and the background for this is that as an Orthodox Jew, on Saturdays and on certain religious holidays, it's not permitted to write or to drive, and we don't attend classes. So it does mean that you miss a lot. And basically, I always had my calendar with me when I'm scheduling things, when I'm looking at classes, and I'm just very proactive. I will approach my professor or my group member or whoever it's relevant and tell them what I'm missing, tell them why I won't be able to be there, and give them options like, can I do it the next day instead? Can I make it up next week? And honestly, it's never been a problem. My entire time at York, people have always been very accepting and very accommodating of it. So I miss whenever there's a religious holiday, but I make it up afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, you could language it as miss, or you could language it as you're observing important things. It's a breath, it's enriching, it's important. And, York has a duty to accommodate around a variety of areas, including religious observances. Mm-hmm. And so if we can be, for our person who asked the question, it's being proactive and saying, this is coming up. And so, and then it's responsible to the faculty member at least to try and shift before, so that the person isn't missing something. Shift things if you can. All right. Now we have two questions that all of us are going to answer to close this time we have together. And the first one is, what do you wish you knew before beginning your grad studies? So let's start with Nitima.
Yeah, so for me, I would say I took 4 courses in the first semester of my MES. And I would say you could take 1 or 2, that's fine. You don't have to take 3 and 4, just start slow, that's fine. And I needed to do 36 credit and I ended up doing 45. So I would say that's fine if you take 1 or 2 courses in the beginning.
Are you saying don't do that?
I would say if you feel overwhelmed, that's fine if you take 1 or 2. Just don't burden yourself that you have to take 4 courses in 1 semester.
Yeah, it's not a race. Yeah.
Yes.
Sarah, how about you? What do you wish you knew before beginning your grad studies?
Getting lost is part of it. I think there's a lot of, pressure to come in and know exactly what you're doing and where your project fits into kind of disciplinary debates. And it's okay to meander and take the space. And yeah, getting lost is part of it. And it's okay and it's good because it means that you're thinking deeply and you can trust yourself throughout that process.
I love that. Trust yourself. Yeah. Ariella, how about you? What do you wish you knew?
Something that I wish I knew is that it's all part of the process of getting to the research, all of the writing and all of the background, and it's all a necessary part of the process. You can't just skip ahead. You kind of have to go through it at the, at a regular pace in order to succeed in the research aspect of my thesis.
Thank you. And Margaret?
I wish I knew, beginning now, like even with my master's, how much meaning that I would get out of going forward with the graduate process, like with graduate studies. I think I would have started earlier, frankly, had I known that, just because it's such a great opportunity to be immersed among other scholars and have the opportunity to have rich, deep, meaningful conversation. I just don't think that you can find that in everyday spaces.
Fantastic. So for students, our final question then, and it's for all to answer, and we've got space. So if you have something burning that you wanted to insert, that you want to say, make sure you take the space to do that. For students who are considering to apply to grad school, what advice would you provide on preparing an application that can help them succeed? And we'll start with Nitima.
Yeah, so for me, I would say work on your writing skills and also get good references. If you know people in the university that can write good references for you, reach out to them.
Okay, and Ariella?
The advice I would give is don't try and make your application like other people's application, or don't try and think, what can I say that will make them feel impressed? Just go with what your interests are and be really honest and be really true to yourself. If there's something that you are passionate about and you can talk about at length, then that's what you want to bring to your application. You want to show them.
Wonderful. Sarah?
My advice would be to think carefully about your research question or your problem of interest, articulate it clearly, and tell a story about why you're the one to study it. Because we come to our interests and things we want to study because they speak to us and because we have experiences and talents and skills that can serve that. So I think it is about articulating your strengths as a scholar and elucidating the fit or the link between the program that you're applying to, the thing you want to study, and why you're the one to do it. So those three pieces.
Thank you. And Margaret?
Yeah, I have to echo what my peers said. Research the school that you want to apply to and the program that you want to apply to. I think that's very important to think about what the philosophy of the school is, what kind of work they've been doing recently. If you can match that with what you want to do, that's also helpful, along with your project ideas. That naturally will shift and grow over time. So you don't need to be perfect from the start, but it's nice to have some alignment. And also, thinking about, as I said earlier, who it is you might want to work with. And finally, back to what Nitima said, if you can edit what you write, I think that's the most important thing, because this is probably the first test.
Fantastic. Well, we've covered an awful lot, haven't we? And I want to thank our panelists. I have a few closing things I want to say, but our panelists were just like you in the audience. They were at one point thinking about, do I want to go to grad school? What do I have to offer? Am I smart enough? Can I afford it? Can I fit it into my life? Is what I want to study even good enough? you know, we still suffer from this imposter syndrome that doesn't matter your age, doesn't matter your background. We're always sort of left wondering, is this good enough? Can I do this? And the answer is, yeah, you can. You have to have a bit of grit. You have to have a bit of grit, and you have to have a bit of humility to be able to say to someone trusted at York, that, or if it's York you choose, we hope you do, I don't understand this. Can you help me understand this? And then take the steps to help yourself understand something and figure stuff out. All of our panelists didn't know what they know today when they were at your place. They just knew they had maybe a burning question. They knew they liked school in some way. Sure, maybe they had a bad experience here and there. Who hasn't? For sure. But they thought they want to give it a shot. And this is what we want you to do. If you have even an inkling that you might want to think about grad studies, go for it. And on behalf of all of us, Anessa, myself, the Dean of the Faculty of Grad Students, Tom Lobel, we hope you choose York University, and that we hope that you can contribute to knowledge that makes a difference. So thanks, everybody. We're going to sign off, and we hope you have a great afternoon. Be careful in the snow if you're in the Greater Toronto area. It's coming.